So this is a part of a project that we've been working on for the last few years at Point Lay, dealing with the Navigating New Arctic. Skip Walker is the PI on that. We're looking at Point Lay, and one of the things we're trying to do here is define what is being caused, what the problems are being caused by the infrastructure versus what's happening with the climate change. And the reason that is important is we can design what's happening, design out some of the problems we're having with the infrastructure, but we have to take into account we can't control the climate change, so we have to work to design to get that. So we wanted to kind of know what we're dealing with and where to put our efforts in all of this. The landscape evolution, we've got climate that's going on in here. We've got water, snow, vegetation disturbance over time. The village, anytime you build infrastructure, you've got disturbance, and the influence of thawing or stabilized ground ice. As far as adapting to changes, how can communities plan for the changes and adapt to the changes of an evolving permafrost landscape? It is changing, and it's changing fairly rapidly, as Vlad said. As you fly over it, every time we fly over it, we can look at old area photos all the way back 1949. We have them, and you start looking at those. You are seeing an evolution of the permafrost terrain. Those have been working out here, and those that live here have seen that. I know that in discussions with the folks at Point Lay, many of the trails that they use for hunting, they are no longer traversable, and they have to go around the areas that they used to be able to traverse. So it is changing, and it's changing in ways that we have to struggle with. I was recently working on the Denali Commission adaptation, looking at the risk assessment, and for the state, we looked at I think it was 280 or 189 communities, and we assessed it for flooding, erosion, and permafrost degradation. And in this case, Point Lay was number 2, tied with Barrow, and Newtok was number 1 there, and only because Newtok had both erosion and permafrost going at the same time, and they were losing like 25 to 30 feet of bank a year, and so that was really problematic for them. But Point Lay is right up at the top, as is here. It is here in Barrow, as far as the risk of infrastructure being damaged by the thawing of permafrost. The team is Ben Jones. He's a cartographer, and he's the one that did create many of the slides I'm going to show you. And Misha Konevsky is here somewhere. There he is. He's the one that drills most of the holes. He's the hard worker that goes down and looks at that. And he also looks at the ice-rich cores and gives us a good idea of what's going on there and what types of materials we got there. Yuri Schurer has been working with us. He's kind of got one leg in each side of the fence. He's an engineer, but he also is a permafrost scientist. Pepe Bolts did a lot of the temperature measurements that we have on another study there. And of course, I was along for the ride. Point Lay is really a great case study in showing the impact of infrastructure on the permafrost. And we looked at the inside the village versus outside the village, and we'll talk a little bit about that. One of the things that we've been working on for the last 2 years, and reason for all the drilling and the poking of holes in the ground, is to try to develop train units so that we know what's going on in different parts of the community and which parts maybe we should grow into, and some idea of which parts of it may want to avoid at least, or do something different. Estimate the rate of thawing in there so that we can look at the timeline of what's going on and have some of that. And as I said, we're going to look at within the community as to what's going on outside of the community, try to understand that. And then from all of that, we're going to make some conclusions about the impact of the infrastructure itself on the permafrost upon which it's founded. Okay, the infrastructure, as Bill said, is rapidly failing. And it's a problem. The water system and wastewater systems is being abandoned. The old system is being abandoned, and replacement is under review. And I don't know if Travis, you're going to be talking about that in a couple of days, but it's important to recognize what's going on there. One of the tanks failed because of permafrost thaw beneath it, and became unstable, and the floor basically separated from the tank and drained the tank itself. The water supply lake, it was lost during as the river cut into one of the ice wedges, and when it cut into the ice wedge, the lake then drained because of the void that was left there. It was not a surprise. We've been watching that for a while. There were a couple of attempts to stop it, but none of those worked very well. And we're also seeing many of the homes are being damaged by the permafrost. And so TNHA is in the process of building some new homes. And to their credit, they're Griffin, reaching out and trying some new things, taking a little bit of risk. And that's just the nature as we evolve. If we don't take risks, we can't succeed. And we know what we've been doing is not working that well. One of the things we did, Ben Jones here on the right, he drills through the ice wedges, and in that way we were able to determine the height of the ice wedge itself. That goes fairly quickly, and he loves doing it. So this is kind of what some of the cuttings here, the white ice there that you see that's coming out of the hole from the ice wedges. And it's very clear when you hit the bottom of them, it changes sound, and all of a sudden the white ice stops coming up. So there's no doubt where the bottom of the ice wedges are. We're also, Misha has done a lot of coring in there and categorizing what the type of permafrost, whether it's intermediate layer, Yedema, or other materials in that. And that work has been invaluable for us to understand. So we got some idea of what thaw consolidation we may have from that work and from those cores. And unfortunately, just simply doing fly augers doesn't necessarily give you that information, but the cores are proving to be invaluable for us. But with the only problem is with this hand auger or hand drill, we can only go down about 5 meters or so. Yeah. Yeah. So we can't go as deep as we would really like to, but it was some of the data that Pepe collected shows that the permafrost, at least in the area down there by the tanks underneath there, that permafrost at about 5 meters it's only about -5 at the moment. Some of the others towards the middle there are a bit colder. They get about -6, -7 degrees C. So there is some variability of the temperature of the permafrost depending on where you are. And that's all down in that area. So the surface temperature is a bit warmer than perhaps we see in some of the other areas. Okay. So one of the things that we wanted to do was map out the terrain. And it really comes down to two basic types of terrain units out there. One is this upper area, which is within the village, all of this north, south, that's all Yedema terrain. So we're seeing that terrain is very closely packed with ice wedges, and those ice wedges go 10 to 12 meters deep. Basically, they're going all the way down to about sea level in that Yedema. In the Drain Lake Basin, which is everything pretty much this side of the road there, that's not shown here. Those tend to be sediments, actually sediments down to about 3 meters or so, much shallower, and it's not quite as ice rich as the Yedema, but the ice wedges are smaller, a little wider spaced, and about 3 to 4 meters deep, so they're not nearly as deep. One thing I will say that this area here is part of that Drain Lake Basin, and the heavy infrastructure is founded on that with a heavy layer of gravel beneath them. And we have noticed that the areas which have gravel beneath them tend to perform a lot better than those that don't. So that's one of the conclusions that we've come up with. Ben he likes flying drones, and so he's got has been doing some orthographic maps. We'd hope to take our LiDAR out there, but unfortunately Alaska Airlines didn't cooperate, and it's sitting in Anchorage still, I think. But nonetheless, we were able to fly that and create this orthographic map, and we have supplied that to the borough for their use. You can pick any point you want, get the elevation of or the terrain in that area. So that's very helpful. But we're also, and I'll show you, we were able to map out the ice wedges, and the ice wedges that have thawed as part of that. So here's a map that Ben has produced, and Ben has been very good about answering my questions. When I ask him a question, he goes away for about 24 hours and comes back and has these nice maps for me. But the community is underlain by Yetama in all of those areas. The area up north here is very similar terrain. It just hasn't been disturbed as much. The Air Force did have some barrels up there at one point, I understand, and I think those have been removed. And so some of that had actually started to heal a bit. We've talked about depth of those ice wedges down about 12 meters and the lack of ice down in the drain lake basins. So they are significantly different. And as I said, the thick gravel pad is proving to be more useful, and that was placed mostly onto the heavy infrastructure. Yuri and I, while Misha was drilling, walked around the community, and we looked very closely at the thaw beneath the buildings. We found that approximately 30% of the piling are in the ice wedge. So that's a pretty high percentage. Some of the homes were entirely in the we noted that we were getting about 6 feet, or in some cases a bit more, of thaw in those areas. So the embedment was originally 10 feet. And Ben there is pointing to the top of that embedment, the original embedment. So we've only got 2, maybe 3 feet or less of embedment left, and you can imagine what that's doing to the stability of the structures that are founded on it. And so that's got us a bit worried, if you will, because it's becoming more and more unstable, and we probably should be thinking about what we're doing. And filling beneath them with fine grain material is certainly a very good option. And I've been talking to Lorraine, and she says if we put a little moss under there, it'll grow, and perhaps we can help stabilize it a bit more by doing something like that. But nonetheless, we are seeing that occurring pretty much in every home. And Griffin, if you desire, we have pretty much every single house, a photo of the foundation, every single house in Point Lake. So you're welcome to get those. Just get a hold of Jana, and she'll give you the link to those photos if you wish to use them. Okay, this is what we call the poster house. This house is entirely founded in ice wedges. It's founded right on the intersection of I think 3 ice wedges in there. You can see here, this is about 5 feet or so, or a little bit more, that is sticking up there. So we're getting a lot of settlement going on in this area. And these are the ponds Bill talked about that are a concern for children in the area who might want to play in that. Not only is it a potential drowning, but it's also probably not the cleanest water that's around. So we really would rather people stay out of that. But this is, and I know the folks that live there, we've talked to them, and they are really concerned about the wind, because when the wind comes up, the house shakes, and they are uncomfortable in staying in that house during those periods of time. This is another house by the clinic to the south end of the village. You can see that some of these piling have been spliced, and people are trying to stabilize it. If you look here, you'll see that bracket has been bent. And so there's a lot of movement in here. This whole area is actually unstable and sliding down into that trough. You can see here these piles. If you look, this is all sliding in this direction. When we were there last week, it looked like there's been some repairs done to that, and this structure is once again occupied. So I was happy to see that some effort had been made to rectify that and make that structure more safe. We've talked about this one a little bit, but I'll go into a little bit. What we're seeing is when they originally had this situation, we're starting to get that thaw. We're getting consolidation in this layer, about 40% consolidation, but in ice wedge, that's 100% consolidation. And so we're getting a situation like this. Some of those piling are essentially kind of hanging out there, very little embedment, and so we've really only got, in cases like this, something over 1/3 to 1/2 of the support that was originally intended for that structure. In the ponds, we're getting a situation like we saw in the Blue House, where there's very little embedment left in that, maybe 2 feet at the most. And so that's a very unstable situation. The folks in Point Lay have started trying to cross brace that and make it more stable. It's probably going to take a little bit more than has been occurring. So we probably need to rethink that a little bit. Okay. So the structural impacts, we constant adjustment of stairs. People are always trying to figure out how to do that. Really? Okay, so I better jump. So I need to go open doors, all the things that you would expect for a structure that's moving. So next 3 slides are really probably the most important 3 slides that I'm going to talk about. This is what it looked like in 1949. This top one is in the northern area. It's been undisturbed. And the other 2 are in areas that have been where structures or village is located. And you can see the progression of the damage, but it's interesting to note that the damage is much greater within the confines of the village than outside the village. That's not to say that the last discussion is wrong, but we're just seeing a large impact. That's due to the snow there. We're getting additional reflection off the buildings to warm the ground. The water that's there, the roads are acting like bathtubs, like holding the water within that. So that when you start adding all of those things together, it starts degrading the ice wedges in there. And so Ben mapped this for me, and we looked at it. And what we found was in block 900, which is the newest one, it's less than 10 years old in this area. We're seeing that we have approximately, by area, about 37% of that is covered by wedges. And when you get to block 400 down in this area, we're seeing, and it's about 45 years or so, we're starting to see in excess of 50% of that area covered in ice wedge troughs. We didn't go by temperature. We started looking at ice wedge troughs only. And so if we take this slide, you can see that over time that the change rate is listed on here. Oddly enough, block 300, which is down here, in one of the older areas, is a little bit faster. And I don't really can't really explain that. But the rate of change is a little bit faster per year. But in the natural areas, is considerably less. Now, that natural area 2 looks backwards, it's healing. And that's because that was an area that was, in 1949, was really disturbed by the Air Force when they were there. And when they removed all the barrels and cleaned up around that area, it did tend to heal a little bit. So that's kind of a special case as we go through that. So it's really, I think the important thing is to recognize that the infrastructure is having a very large impact, a very rapid impact on what's going on with that village. So in conclusion, the permafrost is thawing within the village, and it's driven primarily by the by the infrastructure, and it's more the rate of change, not that climate is not causing change, but the rate of change is much faster. We're also seeing increased ponding, and as Bill discussed earlier, the heat input due to the direct sun plus the indirect sun coming off the building are additive, and causing some issues with that. We've also altered the vegetation. A lot of it's been either removed or they got killed or otherwise disturbed. And the snow drifting, I will compliment the folks in Point Lay. They've been working very hard over the last 8 or 9 years or so, trying to get that snow out of the village and reduce the impact of the snow.